This? Yeah.
Do you want me next to you? Okay.
Good morning. My name is John Quinn, and I'm with the law firm of Quinn, Emanuel, Urquhart, and Sullivan in Los Angeles, California, USA. And this morning, we're going to be talking about the important subject of the importance of law and legal modernization in the promotion of foreign investment. Now, it's almost a truism what foreign investors want, isn't it? They want certainty. They want predictability. They want to know that their investments will be protected. These are headline generalities that no doubt have a lot of truth to them, although there are certainly examples of autocratic regimes where the rule of law is questionable, but there's a record of substantial foreign investments. Some might say that China is an example of that. Not sure we want to get into that. But today we want to focus on specifics, the kinds of legal rules that promote foreign investment, and consider these in light of the considerable body of academic research that exists concerning the relationship between law and foreign investment, using Saudi Arabia in principle as a case in point. And we have with us a panel that is very well suited to discuss this subject, both because of the private world experience that's represented, and the government experience, and the academic experience and background. Our panel is, first, His Excellency Khalid Al Mudaifer, who is the Vice Minister of Mining Affairs with the Ministry of Industry and Mineral Resources of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We also have the Honorable Dan Tehan, the Minister of Trade, Tourism, and Investment in Australia. Unfortunately, he could not be here in person, but we'll hear from him with his recorded remarks. We have Professor Y.S. Steve Lee, who's a visiting professor of law at Georgia State University in the U.S. Steve has devoted his career to the study of this subject, the relationship between legal development and economic development. He's written over 80 articles. He's written one of the leading books on the subject. And also, we're privileged to have Shihana Alazzaz, who's General Counsel and Secretary General of the Public Investment Fund of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And to start with, I'd like to ask His Excellency perhaps to introduce this subject. That is what types of legal regimes, what types of laws, the relationship between law and foreign investment. And you're uniquely, I think, qualified to address this, both because of your experience in the private world as CEO of Modern, and now as the Minister for the Department of Mining Affairs. So perhaps you could give us some general observations, and then talk to us about some facts on the ground, really in the ground, mining industry, and what the experience has been here, and what's being done in Saudi Arabia to promote foreign investment in the mining industry.
Thank you, John, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody at FII looks for a successful investment, but today we can point to one success of us being here in person, having the joy of meeting all of you and doing business face to face. This is, after 2 years, is really a great success. Also, I was really pleased to see, and on the title of this session, that the two seemingly contradictory terms of legal policies and turbocharge. Legal policies sounds dry and technical, maybe bureaucratic, and turbocharge is about speed and excitement. And on the context of foreign direct investment and a critical driver for the world economic growth, makes for a dynamic session of this session. John, what investors all around the world wants, needs, and should get is a fair return for their capital as they contribute to economic growth and job creation. They also need to understand the risks and trust the country they are investing in. For a country to be attractive, the basics is to have a political stability, sizable market, and a competitive fiscal regime, and also a sound FDI regulation. But this is alone is not sufficient. Maybe we can hear from the expert here why is that. For a country to have an attractive investment climate, it has to have political commitment for the investment agenda from the highest level. It has to have institutional coordination and administrative capacity. It has to have stakeholder engagement, including private sector and the local and international. All this should be based also on, supported by a whole of a government, holistic implementation approach to achieve the investment attraction. Taking Saudi Arabia as an example, and starting with Vision 2030 approval and the governance the Vision 2030 have established from the vision itself to the sectorial strategy developments and discussion to the vision realization program, to the entities and leaders' performance, quarterly performance management, all shows how much continuous political commitment to the reforms. More than that, since the Vision 2030 in 2016 was approved, Saudi Arabia has made passed more than 400 changes and updates to our legal framework. We had issued 60 new laws, 77 new regulations. All of those, including the mining law, has gone through a mandated rigorous institutional coordination, alignment, and integration with all the ministries and agencies in the government. More importantly, it has gone through stakeholder engagements, benchmarking with the best in the world, and stakeholder engagement with investors, local, international, with civil society, with NGOs, multilaterals, and public consultation supervised by a newly established entity, the National Competitiveness Center. All this have established an attractive investment climate, while 2020 was due to the pandemic. The whole FDI around the world has been hit, including in the kingdom. But since the beginning of this year, we have seen an increased massive investment and foreign direct investment in Saudi Arabia. The first quarter of this year recorded the highest ever foreign direct investment with more than $14 billion. The first quarter of 2021 was recorded the highest issuance of foreign direct investments in the kingdom since the record has started. All the plus in our own mining ministry, the Ministry of Industry and Mining, we have seen more than $4.7 billion in the second quarter in industries, and most of those are greenfield. All this shows that we are on the right track and we're delivering on the transformation and delivering. The same process have went into the mining regulation. If you allow me just to listen also to the rest of the panelists, I'm sure their contribution will be better in this session than I do. And then I will come back to the mining and what is the changes that has been done in the mining
Very
to
good.
attract more investment. Thank you.
We'll get back to that. And now I think we should hear from the other minister on our panel, Dan Tehan, the Minister of Trade and Tourism in Australia. And if we could please roll the tape of his statement.
Thank you for the invitation to speak at today's conference. I'm doing so from quarantine in Canberra. The Morrison government is working to secure a strong and sustainable economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, powered by the private sector and foreign direct investment. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development estimates global foreign direct investment flows fell by 58% in developed economies in 2020. Getting investment flowing is one of the most powerful things we can do to kickstart our recovery. Today I can update you on Australia's approach to FDI and recent steps we've taken to boost investment. Australia has long welcomed and encouraged foreign investment. It's played a crucial role in Australia's economic success over the last 3 decades, helping to grow our economy and bringing capital, innovation, technology and skills. Australia remains an attractive destination for foreign investment, and we remain committed to boosting foreign direct investment as we come out of this pandemic. We know foreign investors need commercial certainty to enable their long-term investments. That is why Australia's foreign investment framework, our taxation, our visas, as well as our liberal democratic values and strong institutions, all work together to create an enabling environment for commercially driven business decisions. We're continuing to expand opportunities for two-way investment through our FTA agenda, including negotiations with the UK, the EU, and with the Latin American countries of the Pacific Alliance. We're also implementing initiatives like the Global Talent and Business Attraction Task Force, which is looking at how we can identify and attract more high-value businesses and exceptional talent to Australia, and to facilitate their rapid and seamless integration into the Australian economy. This year, Australia implemented wide-ranging reforms to our foreign investment framework to protect national security, while also making it easier for businesses to invest in our country. Australia is also well placed to be a global leader in the development and provision of low emissions technology. Australia is building wind and solar around 3 times faster than Europe or the USA on a per person basis, and we are also investing in transmission projects to support our record levels of renewables and continue to deliver affordable, reliable energy. Australia has developed a technology investment roadmap to accelerate low emissions technology deployment to the tune of around $20 billion of Australian government investment over the decade to 2030. We expect to leverage more than $80 billion of total investment by 2030, with a focus on clean hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, low carbon materials like steel and aluminium, long duration energy storage, and soil carbon. Technology, not taxes, will enable us to achieve our goals of addressing climate change without imposing unacceptable costs on Australians on their electricity bills and jobs, especially in regional areas and heavy industries. Technology that is affordable and scalable, working not just in countries like Australia, but across our many trading regions. This is just one example of how Australia is looking to lead the way towards a strong economic recovery after COVID-19, getting foreign investment flowing and prioritising investment in low emissions technologies. Australia is laying the foundation for a more sustainable and prosperous future for all. and we look forward to welcoming investment and engaging with our international partners on this journey. Thank you.
Steve, sounds good. Saudi Arabia is open for business. They're passing new laws there. Australia is open for business. They know about climate change, sustainability, and all the rest of it that we've heard about. Does that guarantee success?
Well, we'll talk about that, okay? So, well, first of all, it's an honor to be in this panel, and Your Excellency. And John is one of the greatest lawyers in America, and also Shihana, thank you. So let's talk about whether it's sufficient for attracting and retaining investment. We all know that law is important. We have some perception about it. But there are three things that you need to ensure that your law has in order to attract and retain FDIs. The one is regulatory design. The law has to be well designed to ensure that you could attract and retain FDI. So what do I mean by good design? The regulatory design has to be ensured by three things. I try not to turn this into a lecture, so help me here a little bit. So first element for good design is anticipated policy. The law aims to achieve a policy. But if you do not design the law effectively, then you will have a mixed outcome. So let me give you an example. So law that designed to give tax rebate for investment, which investors welcome. But at the same time, the same law provides a tough and close monitoring and reporting requirement. You'll find such laws in many places. And what happens is the law's incentive in tax rebate is mixed up with all this regulatory burden, and the outcome is that you might have a mixed one. So that's importance of anticipated policy. When you look at the law, you've got to be clear what kind of policy outcome you're going to get. That's the first. And second is organization of law, legal frameworks, and institutions. So you may have a good law on the book that's designed to attract investors. But if your frameworks do not support that, for instance, in a place, I'm not going to name the country, where there are strong incentives for investment, large tax rebates and dispute settlement preferences, but that particular legal system did not protect the property rights completely. So then there is a conflict between the law that you have on the book that attract investment and the legal frameworks that do not support property rights completely. Then you have a problem. Even if you have a good laws and good frameworks, now some countries do not have a good institutional framework. So let's say your investment partner has violated the contract. You need not only the good laws and good frameworks, but you need a good institutions like effective courts and effective governance that actually implement the law. And many countries, they don't have it. So organization of law institutions, frameworks institutions are also very important. It has to be coherent and consistent. Third, your law has to be adapting to socio-economic conditions on the ground. Simply put, socio-economic conditions mean economic, social, political conditions. What does that mean? A good law that does not conform to a core ethical and religious value on the ground will not work. So the law that works very well in the United States and UK may not work in some other places where that law has a conflict with important core religious or cultural values on the ground. So you have to watch out for that too. Now, the second major category of the element you should have is a compliance. So otherwise, well-designed law has a limited effectiveness if it does not command strong compliance. Now, compliance has two folds. One, the question is whether the law generally is respected. So a lot of countries do a law reform where the rule of law is not strong enough. So in order to have an effect from your investment attracting law, you better have an environment where law itself is respected. Otherwise, good law will not be effective where rule of law is not generally respected. So that's a big task, frankly. And also specific compliance. So let's say you have a very effective and attractive law in a place where rule of law is strongly observed, like United Kingdom or US and elsewhere, but that particular law may have a sharp political objection from the people or from the community, so you have to watch out for that too. So law has to have a strong compliance both generally and specifically pertaining to that particular law. That's a second. Third, law must have a strong implementation. In most cases, the state has to implement the law. And there are two components to it. One, state capacity. So in many places, a good law has been imported, and it could be complied. The problem is the government does not have capacity to implement it. That capacity is normally technical, financial, administrative, and capabilities, and that is an important factor. And the last, political will. Now, a law that is supposed to attract investment might have resistance on the ground. Why would anybody resist it? Maybe domestic businesses that do not want to compete with foreign investors. Maybe some other foreign countries that had a special relationship. And more often than not, the government cave in. In democracies, they have to get votes. Even in autocracies, they want to be popular. So there has to be a strong political leadership to ensure that the law is implemented on the ground. And more often than not, it has proven to be a key element. So these are the things that I think that the law has to have in order to attract and retain FDI for long-term resilience.
All right. Thank you, Steve. So Shihana, you've been in private practice, you've been at major law firms, you're now general counsel of the Public Investment Fund, which of course invests all around the world, also invests in Saudi Arabia. We've heard some of the sort of practice, implementation of new laws being enacted, the theory from Professor Lee, maybe enacting laws isn't enough, we have these other things that have to happen for it to be effective to foreign investment. What's your reaction to this based on your own experience?
Can you hear me?
Can.
Well, thank you, John. Let me start by saying it's a pleasure to be here, back at the FII, and to see that life is coming back to normal, where elsewhere in the world struggle seems to remain. I must say, the government of Saudi Arabia has dealt with this pandemic in the most unparalleled way, in a very calm and grounded and impactful way. So thank you for being with us, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak and address everyone. Maybe I'd like to pick it up from where Professor Lee has left it. I think it is very true that good laws and policies and regulations are essential but not sufficient. One example that comes from our day-to-day job is the transformation that PIF went through. So we're not talking about a nation, we're talking about the PIF, the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Saudi Arabia. And the transformation that it went through required a set of policies and regulations and procedures to be worked on and drafted and agreed among the team. And that took effectively a year to two. But the team frequently jokes about the fact that they want to frame it and hang it in my office for me to be reminded about the poor implementation that this will take over the next 5 years or so. I think the answer to that is surely it's a challenge, and implementation is a challenge. But we've got a real-life example of how, at a nationwide level, regulations, policies, procedures were affected in a very efficient, impactful way. And in fact, before I give the answer, which is an answer known to everyone and has been a buzzword throughout the FII, I'll draw on an incident that occurred at Harvard. Someone that I saw behind me, Dr. Ibrahim Al-Mu'jal, visited Harvard recently, and one of the students asked him a question about what the West can learn from Saudi Arabia. And
Good question,
the answer was twofold. Hospitality,
for sure.
which I think is a bit overwhelming for the West to learn from the Arab world or Saudi Arabia. But the second is digitization. And I think he was right. And it is something that came up throughout the panels. And going back to how my team mocks the fact that this set of policies and procedures will make a good artwork piling up on our desks, I think the fact that we can digitize it and put it into a framework that takes away the discretion that might be unfairly exercised or slowly and bureaucratically unfolded is key. And I'm not suggesting that lawyers will be out of business, but there's something to be said about how these good laws ought to make it through a system that helps lay people get to the day-to-day job done. And there's a real-life example. I mean, you have all, I believe, plugged into the super government app, Tawakkalna, which I believe translates into in which we trust or which we empower. And it is a very powerful tool in which the Ministry of Interior has plugged in, and you can track your traffics and violations. The Ministry of Education has plugged in, and you can track your students and performance there. The Ministry of Health has plugged in, and without the need to know what it requires for you to be allowed into a forum like that, a green screen shows up and tells you you're good to go. So I think there's something to be said about laws and regulations and policies that are intended to do well, but fail in implementation. But we live in a modern world where digitization could be the answer to a lot of that. That's not to say that discretion is completely eliminated or taken away, but it does narrow the room for corruption, fraud, unfairness, and provides the clarity that His Excellency was alluded to. In your opening remarks, you said investors do look for predictability, stability, and certainty. And if you've got a system in which there's very effective ways to provide input and output, I think that's the game of today's business. And Saudi Arabia has really set itself as an example to the rest of the world. And we've got a competitive advantage nowadays in how we do business in a world that is handicapped and paralyzed with pandemics and crises. And that is an effective answer to many of those questions. But going back, I think, to a point that you made about PIF investing around the world and investing in Saudi Arabia. One thing that has been announced earlier this year is the amount of deployed cash that PIF is targeting to invest in the local economy. 150 billion Saudi riyals on an annual basis for the next 5 years. That may sound like a shopping spree for a lot of folks, but I think we look at it in two folds. One is embarking on new strategic sectors that have been untapped and opening the door to a lot of co-investors to come along. And two, enabling some of the existing private companies that may need a baking soda to increase the pie. There's a live example just outside of the Ritz. As you drove in, you probably noticed a construction site. This is a newly constructed project that would include nothing but international brands and IP and operators and F&B and retail, where a Saudi PIF subsidiary has built the infrastructure, constructed the building, deployed the cash needed for the capex, and has effectively created a plug-and-play playground for a lot of international capital to come in and hit the ground running. So we'd like to think of ourselves as the partner of choice, the most impactful investor, and here to put our hand in hand with foreign investors to make a real impact on the ground.
Fabulous. Fabulous. I understand there's going to be something like 9 restaurants there and movie theaters and entertainment.
That's already running. I don't want this to turn into a Riyadh season promotion,
Okay.
but please, if you haven't discovered some of these new restaurants that have opened up, the old part of town, the city center, Al Murabba has what you're talking about, and some fabulous brands to be looked at.
All right, so from restaurants and food back to mining, Your Excellency. Can you talk to us a little specifically in the Ministry of Mining, what has been done in terms of legal improvement, innovation, change to try to stimulate foreign investment in mining in Saudi Arabia?
Thank you, John. Before we getting into Saudi Arabia mining around the world, I mean the world as it grows and requires a new future green economy will be more mineral intensive, and we need more mining. In Saudi Arabia, and part of the Vision 2030, one of the sector that to diversify economy, the Vision identified mining as one of the sector to do so. The strategy was worked with stakeholder engagement, with a good survey around the world. We knew from that strategy work that the perception on the legal framework is challenged. The strategy was approved in December 2017. I joined the ministry from the private sector in mid of 2018 to be the first vice minister of mining, because now mining is one of the sector to focus. And while joining, coming from the private sector, like all investors and experts here, I knew for us to be successful, we need to have a legal framework that is competitive, transparent, predictable, and non-discriminating. And we start, of course, with all the process I have described of the Vision 2030 implementation governance, a governance of implementation that the world can learn from. And we worked around, we have done stakeholder engagement with investors all around the world, in Australia especially, but also in all countries, local and foreign. We have worked with the World Bank to criticize and provide knowledge and comparison. We have worked with the IGF, ICMMs, all the international organization that works on mining. And also, at the end, with all these, we've done the institutional coordination. We have done the stakeholder engagement as I described, the political commitments through the Vision Implementation Program, and the leadership was clear. We have delivered, I think, one of the world's best modern mining laws. Why is that? Nowadays, and it is competitive. It provides the best fiscal regime, mining fiscal regime in the world. It shows, it gives incentive rather than punishment to investor, for greenfield investors, but also for value creation within the kingdom. It is also transparent. First come, first assessed. We publish all the application we receive, and all licenses were issued with name and justification for everybody to see on the computer. It's also predictable. I think we have read the book of Dr. Lee and took that advice of Shihana, and we made sure for it to be predictable. It had stated limits and a limitation on administrative discretion, and when there is administration discretion, it is raised to the higher either committees or the ministers, or it also puts a clear dispute resolution arrangements. Also, there's the right to get the license if all the requirements specified clearly are achieved. It also defines a clear accountability, both for the investor and for the ministry. It gives time limits for when the answer to be required from the investor and from the ministry. And because mining involves long lead items between exploration and production that can go from 10 to 15 years to 60 years, we knew, and mining involves, it's very important for miners to have security of tenure and regulatory predictability. Therefore, we made sure that there is enough clarity and certainty on the law to describe the security of title that it has there, and we provide a long periods of license that can go up to 60 years with a clear path. We guarantee there's a guarantees in the law that there will be no change to the license and license condition without the investor consent, and we clear right of transfer, exit, mortgage, and change of control. Finally, our mining law and regulatory framework was progressive. It's a progressive in terms of it has embraced ESG principles. It has clear definition of community engagement requirements, protection of environments, and protection of safety of the people working and living around the mine is clearly stipulated. It gives incentives for those who there. Also, sustainability reporting is clearly described to make sure that we get there. The law has been effective in this year. We have received a large number of applications, more than 600 applications for exploration license, more than anything we have seen before. We have seen interest from foreign investors. And so we think we have reformed and ticked all the boxes in terms of a good implementation, a good clarity, reduce the risk, and have paved the way to regain the trust of the investors.
Your Excellency, do you mind if I interrupt you to ask a question? In my country, we have bureaucrats. And in my state of California, there are bureaucrats. I'm sure when you were appointed to your position, there were, I don't know if you call them bureaucrats, but civil servants who were used to the old ways. And all these new laws have been passed. People have studied best practices. Professor Lee tells us that implementation is every bit as important. What has been done in the mining department to try to bring along the civil servants who work in your department and make sure they understand this is new and we need a new way of doing things?
Yes, this is very important, by the way. But however, in Saudi Arabia, it is a little bit easier, not because for the mining, because the whole of kingdom is transforming. This transformation is clear for everybody to deliver on it or, but everybody has to change, and the whole transformation in the kingdom had helped us and the bureaucrats, the experienced bureaucrats we have, to see that change is inevitable. We have to change.
Steve, we need some of that too, I think, in our country.
Sure.
We have a hard time getting everybody on the same page. You may have read about that. But Steve, what would be an example of a country that you think really stands out as a paradigm of a country that changed laws in a way to promote foreign investment and was successful in doing that and implementing it?
One example I can give is Vietnam.
Vietnam.
Vietnam, yes, it is. And I sent you a graph showing the Vietnam's FDI coming from almost zero to quite substantial. Over, I think it's 30, 40 times. Because they implemented FDIs that will bring in technology and capital in a way that prioritize investment even over their domestic investment, knowing that what they had was a limited economy under communist rule. So I can go on for a few minutes, but then if I
We don't have a
summarize
few.
there was a very strong political will across the nation, just as Saudi leadership has, that without the foreign investment and all the benefits that comes along to the country will only have a limited potential for growth. And that really supported, I think, the success of those implementation during those time. Now, I'm not saying that Vietnam is without any problem these days,
Right.
but at least during those period, the strong implementation of investment favoring laws in the 90s and early 2000s in Vietnam really gave them a success.
Let me kind of throw out a conundrum. I did some research, and there's a couple of metrics which the World Bank and people affiliated with the World Bank, they come up with some scales like the rule of law, and they measure each country by the rule of law, and ease of doing business. And for the last 2 years for which data was available, on both categories, rule of law and ease of doing business, Saudi Arabia had the highest percentage gain in the world. And that's part of this vision, shared vision that you were talking about, Your Excellency. But the data, at least so far that I've seen, hasn't yet shown that response in terms of increases in foreign investment. I'll just throw this out for any of you that want to respond to this. Why might that be?
I think there's a lag, naturally, but also I think we suffer from preconceived notions, and we continue to fight that. Part of it is because we had been hidden for such a long time, and only recently have we unleashed the veil and showed our true colors and invited the world to come see for itself what the reality on the ground is like. In the first FII, if I recall, the Crown Prince came on stage and described that our culture has been hijacked for the longest time with a very narrow, extreme school of thought, and finally declared that we're here to bring in diversity and transparency and accountability. So there's lag for us to catch up, I think, with historical suffering and preconceived notion. But I also think that only a few have realized what an unparalleled opportunity exists in the kingdom, especially with the new laws that have been implemented, as His Excellency has alluded to. And I think one that is coming very soon and will be a game changer is codifying what historically was left to discretion of judges and administrators and public servants. And that is recently announced by the Minister of Justice. And that will be the reality on the ground very differently once that set of codified laws come into effect,
Right.
I think.
So we're about out of time, but let me just ask each of you if you have any concluding remarks to share. Your Excellency?
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you, John, for giving us the opportunity for a few remarks before we end. And also thanks for the fellow panelists for their valuable insights. I've learned a lot, I'm sure, after the book, and Shihana will be around to always help us learn. And I hope that we, in the session, have pointed out the importance, and we take away the importance for countries to improve on their framework for the foreign direct investment, because investment is required for the world to grow. Investment is required for the world to have a better, greener future to come. And for mining, for mining, the world would require more mines and more minerals as it grows. The region, including Saudi Arabia, as we are opening up since January this year, but more the larger region of Eastern Africa, Middle East, Central Asia, and North Africa provide a super region to supply the new demands on the region. And if you allow me to do some marketing, we are doing a future mineral summit in January of 2022, and we invite everybody here in the room and also in FII and friends and families to come back in January. It will be cold, but the Saudi Arabia cold. And I'm sure everybody will enjoy the summit, but more enjoy the Riyadh at that time. And at that, this is the first of its kind summit to ensure that the whole world, is getting it right in terms of the future of mining, being greener, being safer, being on a better environmental terms, but also having new discoveries to supply the new world with the minerals they need. The last statement, I would say that Saudi Arabia is very much open for business. It provides massive numbers of opportunities in all sectors, but especially in the newly open sector, mining, tourism, renewables, and digital and technology and innovations, and the newly focused industrial sector our ministry is working on. Thank you very much for the session, and thank you very much to the panelists, and thanks for everybody who is here, and we're glad to see everybody back in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Professor Lee, any concluding observations?
Sure. Thanks, John. What's the good law? That's been a question that we're entertaining today. Surprisingly, it's not the law that looks good on the books. It's the law that works well on the ground. And the important lesson I've learned through my scholarship is that a good law that works very well in the United States and UK actually may not be a good law in your own country. And I gave the reasons. If you analyze the law from the elements I've explained, you'll find out the important task is to find the law that works well on the ground. I might just have a little time to give you a few examples. And if you remember back in the 90s, the laws that privatized and deregulated back in the States and the UK worked to some extent. It has some achievement there. But when the same legal regime was tried to be applied in Russia, 90s, it wasn't successful. By contrast, the China that applied the law that mandates much more gradual privatization worked much better. So that shows the same law may not work in the same way. So international good practice is a good reference, but it's not a mandate. So the important message I want to give today is for you to find out what makes the law work well on the ground in Saudi. And also mention the pressure coming from within and from the outside against adopting good law. And it happens, the resistance happens because a good law, it may be good for the country, but may not be good law for some domestic interests and businesses that prefer old ways, as Your Excellency would know. And also the pressure comes from the outside, that if the international interests may not find your good law aligned with their own interest, they object. So
Thanks.
there is a need for a strong political leadership in that. Thank you.
Shihana.
I'll keep it short. I think from a PIF perspective, when we think about foreign investment or we think about cross-border transactions, we don't think of countries. We think about viable commercial opportunities regardless where they exist. And while foreign capital is often described as greedy and inconsiderate, whichever way it's coming, it's very important to keep in mind mutually beneficial reciprocal relationships where there's transfer of knowledge and know-how and technology. So that's important to keep in mind when we think about investment coming into Saudi Arabia as well. We don't look for investment that come in without those investments being mutually beneficial for PIF and for the co-investor.
Thank you. Excellent. Well, thank you all. It's been a pleasure to participate on this panel with you. Thank you very much.